Hello, Champaign-Urbana. Welcome. What an incredible turnout tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. It is an absolute great honor to stand before so many people who care about the future of Illinois' water. I want to take some time up top here to express my deep gratitude for our team at Prairie Rivers Network, who's been hustling around here all night, getting these slides. Took about half of the team, I think, to get the slides up here tonight, but that's what teamwork's all about. Thank you all. Yeah, let's hear it for them. Our board and our members as well, you have given your time, your resources, and your trust in Prairie Rivers Network, and your support has powered our days, day in and day out at Prairie Rivers. But I'm also equally grateful for how many new people are in the room with us tonight. Chris can certainly turn out a crowd, and I'm really excited to welcome you all to our network. My name is Maggie Bruns. I am the relatively new executive director here at Prairie Rivers. For those of you who don't know Prairie Rivers, our organization has about 57 years under its belt working to protect water, heal land, and inspire change across Illinois. We cut our teeth fighting an Army Corps dam project that would have flooded large parts of Allerton Park, a very special place here in central Illinois. And since those early days, we've continued to strengthen our muscles, grow our network, and protect communities up and down the state, including special places like the Middle Fork River right down the road, often with the help of many people in this room. So thank you all. This is our community, our network, and we have deep roots in making change together. Whether you've been with Prairie Rivers since its start, and there are many people here who have, or today is just your first time hearing about our work, I'm so very thankful to have you here tonight as we launch this next chapter of Prairie Rivers. I'm going to start with some good news, and then I'm going to walk you all the way back to the bad news. So as we sit here tonight, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to leverage historical funding from the feds, just like with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And we have an opportunity to align those resources to advance Illinois' updated state water plan, something we are very proud to have, and now we're going to be working to implement at the full scale here. So Illinois sits with the potential to clean up legacy pollution from abandoned coal mines. We can deploy nature-based solutions to clean up our water while providing critical habitat for wildlife, advance statewide wetlands protection, and update our infrastructure to enhance water quality for both rural and urban communities across the state. Illinois can become a clean water leader in the Midwest, and we can help clean up communities downstream all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. But to realize these opportunities, we need leaders and groups like Prairie Rivers to step up. And that's just what we're doing here tonight. Tonight, with a few hundred people, a few hundred of our closest and newest friends, I should say, gathered around, we're publicly launching Clean Water Forever. It's an all-encompassing campaign to change how Illinois views water and also how we act to protect it forever. We'll start this work in southern Illinois, working our way north, and encouraging communities to look upstream to address the issues impacting their community. This will inevitably lead us to Chicago's doorstep, where they miraculously changed the flow of a river just to send their pollution away from those big, beautiful Great Lakes and right into our backyards. As part of this campaign, we have 4 interconnected issues that guide the work ahead. Quantity. Illinois must protect the long-term viability of its water supply, ensuring that aquifers and public water supplies are not depleted from agricultural irrigation and industrial withdrawals. And in doing this, we can allow these critical resources to naturally recharge. Equity. Illinois must address water rate and water quality disparities that disproportionately impact low-income and marginalized communities across the state. Access. Illinois must act to protect the public's right to access, use, and enjoy public waters. And quality. Illinois must hold polluters accountable to clean up their mess and change their ways, and in doing so, protect our right to clean water. So, some of you might be asking yourself, why this, why now? And I'm going to turn over to the bad news. The underreported and alarming reality of Illinois' water crisis in just a few numbers. Of the streams that Illinois EPA assessed for water quality conditions from 2020 to 2022, 40% are too polluted to support aquatic life. 62% are too polluted to support indigenous aquatic life. 85% are too polluted to support swimming or direct human contact. And 100%, yes, 100% are too polluted to support fish consumption in Illinois. So tonight we wanted to start, 100%, like there it is right there, folks. We have a major, major problem. And so tonight we wanted to start the challenging and difficult conversation regarding our water and the biggest threats to it. And we're doing this because Clean Water Forever starts with telling the truth about the water quality crisis right here in the Midwest. But it ends with finding long-term solutions to protect our communities. And that's just what we're going to try to do. We have a massive, some might say colossal, problem on our hands. And tonight we are ringing the alarm. While we will never, ever, ever outspend our opponents, we wanted to show them that Prairie Rivers is stepping up and we're getting louder. We wanted to turn their heads and catch their attention. We wanted to send a clear message that the status quo in Illinois is no longer accepted. And that's why we called our hero, Chris Jones, to town tonight. I have the honor of introducing our special guest. Chris speaks truth to power and has inspired our team to really lean in. With the publication of his book, which so many of you are leaving here with tonight, The Swine Republic, Struggles with the Truth About Agriculture and Water Quality, Chris has emerged as a leading voice in the midwestern water quality crisis. Despite the cost, Chris is one of the few telling the unvarnished truth that industrial row crop agriculture is poisoning our waters. Tonight, Chris will share more about his recent book, and he'll join with my teammate Robert Hirschfeld to answer some questions from the crowd. I think Tom Philpott, formerly of Mother Jones and now at Johns Hopkins University, said it best in the foreword of the book. Chris is done with polite science. Well, Chris, Prairie Rivers Network is also done with that too. We've worked for decades trying to change the system from within, one farm at a time. And as you all hear tonight, that simply will not change the systemic nature of the problems that we're facing here in Champaign-Urbana, in Illinois, and across the Midwest. We must be bold, we must get loud, and we must all push forward together like we've never done before. Now, tonight, you might hear some science and some information that ruffles your feathers. You might hear things that go against decades of massive marketing campaigns that have informed our way of thinking about agriculture right here in the heartland. These are challenging discussions, but these are discussions that need to happen. So, I want to thank every single person in this room for showing up. This is a room of potential. This is a room of change makers, of leaders, and together we're going to change the way Illinois thinks and acts to protect our water forever. With that, I will welcome Chris to the stage.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. And so I got a little story to tell you. A couple months ago, I did a book event in Ames, Iowa, and there was maybe 50 people there. And the young woman that ran the bookstore came and asked me before the event, are you nervous? And I said, no. And she was astonished that I wouldn't be nervous. And I said, well, you know, I've spoken to hundreds of groups over the last 25 years or so, and so I don't get nervous at all. And so then I walked up here tonight, and I saw my name on that sign out there, and I got to tell you, I got a little nervous. And then I walked in here and saw all these chairs, and then I made these poor people set up these slides because I was so nervous, and I thought, you know, I'm not going to be able to speak contemporaneously because I'm nervous for the first time. So that's a story. So I'm going to make you suffer through these slides, and so this kind gentleman here is going to help me, and we can just go on to the next one there. And so you can just scroll through the bullets here. And I am from Iowa. I spend a lot of my time in Iowa City, and I also spend some time up at DeSoto, Wisconsin on the Mississippi River, and that's these pictures here. And it's Upper Mississippi River is my favorite place to be, and so I love it up there. If you've never been up there, you might take a look at it. And so here's my book, as you know, and you've seen that, and I also have a Substack, and I write for that. And if you don't know, Substack is a great tool. Mine is riverraccoon.substack.com, and I write essays there, and it's sort of a continuation of my blog from the university, and so some of them are not terrible, and so you can go there and read them for free if you want. And so when I talk to groups about water quality, it's important to understand geology, and the geology here in the upper Midwest is one of glaciation. We've had 3 main events of glaciers. The first one was what we call the pre-Illinoian event, which is 2.5 million to 500,000 years ago. The second one was the Illinoisan event, and you can see that there. And then the last one was the Wisconsin Glacier, and that's the one that's most important for Iowa because that tongue of ice coming down over north central Iowa is what we call the Des Moines Lobe, and that's where a lot of our problems originate. And so because of glaciation, we have these different landforms across Iowa, and you know, you drive across Iowa and you might think it all looks the same, and really it's not, but it looks the same because we only have 2 species out there, right? Corn and soybean, and so it masks these differences in the landforms. And so let's just skip through those. Get to the next slide. And so this is what Iowa was like before Europeans got there. We had the pothole wetlands in the top slide. We had the oak savanna there in the lower left, and the tall grass prairie in the lower right. And of course, that's all gone. We all got rid of it to farm. And so now about 70% of our land is in crops and about 85% is in crop production. And so this is what the landscape looks like now. Prior to settlement, this is what our streams look like. We know the prairie streams were these shallow systems that spilled out into the floodplain very frequently. We had the clean water species, the smallmouth bass and pumpkin seed sunfish, and then the generalist species, the channel catfish, and perennial vegetation on the riverbanks. And then we got here, we started plowing, and Iowa was settled about the same time that John Deere invented the steel plow. And the other big thing we did is we drained the landscape. And so this is one thing a lot of people in the public don't realize what we did and the consequences of it. And so much of our land was wet, and the same was over here in Illinois. And so we lowered the water table 4 feet in Iowa to optimize conditions for corn and soybean, and we created these big drainage ditches you can see there, these trapezoidal ditches. And so we created thousands of miles of streams to drain the landscape. And so now a lot of our streams, the start of our streams look like this. And so those are county tile mains. That's in northwest Iowa. That's the start of the Raccoon River, the source of drinking water for the city of Des Moines. And so you might imagine prior to settlement, water kind of gently overspilling a wetland into the stream channel. Doesn't do that anymore. The wetlands are gone, so we drain it into a trapezoidal ditch, and that's the start of our streams. The other big thing is we straightened our streams. And so this stream here is Walnut Creek in Jasper County, east of Des Moines. The green line there, if you can see it, was the stream channel in 1930. The red line is the stream channel today. And so we cut half the length out of that section of stream, but the vertical drop from point A to point B is still the same. And so we energized the water, right? And we did this to square up fields to make them easier to farm. And so that's Walnut Creek right there. And believe it or not, those two photos are taken from the same spot. And believe it or not, that stream can go from the photo on the left to the photo on the right and back to the photo on the left in 24 hours. That's how flashy our streams are, because we've changed the hydrology and we removed the perennial vegetation from the landscape. So now all our streams look like this. They're down in these canyons, right? And so because of the straightening and the energizing of the water, the streams erode downward, all right? And they will erode clear down to the bedrock in some cases. And so if you drive across the countryside and you drive across a bridge and you look at the stream and it looks like this, you might not know that it shouldn't look like that, right? You might think that's the natural condition. It's not. And so now our streams are muddy all the time because the water can access these unvegetated banks. And we have the pollution-tolerant species of carp and bullhead, and we still have the generalist species of channel catfish, because these are not sight feeders, right? They don't capture their food through sight, and so they're able to survive this condition. The other big thing that's happened over the last century is our farms have become less diversified, and so this is a very famous picture here, graph. A guy at Iowa DNR made this. This is a farm in Winnebago County in the 1940s. We can see a great diversity of land use there. Corn, a little bit of soy, hay, oats, still some wetlands, some woodlots, these sorts of things. And then by 1976, I think it is, it's all corn and soybean, and there's a few oats left, but even in the modern day, those oats would be gone. And so, go ahead. And so this is what our farming system looks like, and it looks really clean, right? When we drive across the countryside and we look at our farms, they look clean. And so we have the GMO crops, no weeds out there, looks nice. We have 25 million hogs in Iowa. You could drive across the whole state of Iowa and never see a hog, even though we have 25 million of them. And then we have the ethanol industry. And so this is Iowa agriculture, and it's pretty much Illinois agriculture too, without all the livestock. Then we have the CAFOs. We have about 8,000 CAFOs in Iowa. And so these are livestock operations that require a construction permit. I was sort of astonished today. I was asked a couple times what CAFO meant. And, you know, nobody in Iowa doesn't know what a CAFO is, confined animal feeding operation. And so you can see these are concentrated in certain sections of the state. And so this has left us with these problems, mainly soil erosion and nutrient pollution. Go ahead. A lot of our drinking water has been contaminated by this system. In Iowa, we have 7,000 private wells that are contaminated with nitrate above the safe limit. Soil erosion, although we've had some improvements after the 1985 Farm Bill, still high. You can see there where soil erosion is worst in Iowa, the far west, and then northeast Iowa. We had some improvements, as I said, from about 1985 up to 2000 after we got conservation compliance in the Farm Bill. We have had very few improvements in soil erosion since then. And so we see here Iowa's the worst state in the United States in terms of soil erosion. We can see Illinois there as about fourth, I think. Go ahead. And so we have a problem of scale, okay? This is what we don't want to talk about. We want to talk about all the time, how can we get farmers to do this, that, and the other thing? You know, put a Band-Aid here and put a diaper here, and hopefully we'll get the water quality we want someday. The thing we won't talk about is the problem of scale. And so we have 70% of our land in Iowa in production. We have 11,000 square miles of our land that are committed just to grow corn for ethanol. So that's 20% of our state. Our state's area is got corn on it to grow, to produce ethanol. We have 25 million hogs. We're the top hog state. We have 4 million beef cattle. We're the top egg state. We have 80 million chickens. 5 million turkeys. What all do I have there? 4 million broiler chickens, 220,000 dairy cattle. And so can we get the environmental outcomes that we want when we're producing at this scale? And I would say to you that we cannot. And so the states have responded to this with these nutrient strategies. And so Iowa was the first, and Illinois has one, the nutrient reduction strategy. And, you know, the science assessments behind these nutrient reduction strategies were sound. And so teams of scientists identified practices that would reduce nutrient loss from farm fields. But we have to remember that these were aligned with the Gulf of Mexico task force, okay? Aligned with the objectives to reduce the dead zone size in the Gulf of Mexico. They were not designed to improve water quality for drinking here in these states or for recreation. And I would submit to you that these things are working if you understand what the objective of these were. And the objective was to persuade EPA that agriculture in the Corn Belt should not be regulated like agriculture in the Chesapeake Bay is regulated. And from that perspective, the nutrient strategies are a smashing success. But paying farmers, you know, one by one to adopt practices, we do not have enough money to solve this problem. There's a dead zone down in the Gulf of Mexico. The nutrients from the Mississippi River feed algae blooms. When the algae die, they consume oxygen, and they make the water unsuitable for shrimp and fish and so forth. And so the practices of the nutrient strategies, you know, we have cover crops, we have constructed wetlands, we have about 90 of these constructed wetlands, and then we have things like saturated buffers, and these are all practices that are eligible for cost share in Iowa, and I'm sure Illinois is similar. But the thing we don't want to talk about, another thing we don't want to talk about, are the inputs. And we know that the inputs are increasing in Iowa. And so that's the wide bars there. Over time, from 1999 up until 2018, the red line there is the difference between the inputs for nitrogen and what's being extracted in the crop, okay? The blue line is what's in our rivers. And so we know that surplus nitrogen, we know that 32% of it gets into our water, the surplus. And so I say this all the time. How can we expect the taxpayers to pay for these edge of field practices like the wetlands and the saturated buffers and cover crops? How can we ask the taxpayer to pay for that stuff and still give farmers license to do whatever they want with inputs? It does not make sense. It's perverse policy. The other thing is we still are putting in tile like crazy people in Iowa. And so we know that tile is the primary delivery mechanism for nitrate from farm fields to the stream network. Go ahead there. And we know farmers in Iowa, I know you can't read that, are spending about $100 million a year on new tile. And so as inputs increase and as the amount of tile increases, then, why would we expect the amount of nitrogen in our streams to go down? Why would we expect that? When we look at practice adoption. And so we know in Iowa, the red line there is state as a whole, the nitrogen load in our streams has about doubled since 2003. Go ahead. And so what can we do? We have these structural factors, right, that really prevent us from getting clean water. And so, we need to diversify our farms. And so that guy there is Matt Liebman. He just retired from Iowa State. He spent his career studying these diverse rotations of a 5-year rotation there of corn, soy, oats, and then 2 years of alfalfa versus corn and soy. And the environmental outcomes of the extended rotation are so much better. And farmers can earn the same amount of money doing this. Why don't they do this? Well, because that extended rotation takes more work. It's a lot more work to manage a farm with a 5-rotation crop than it is a 2-rotation crop. So let's talk about ethanol for a minute. And so as I said, about 20% of our land in Iowa is used to produce ethanol. And this has caused perversity in agriculture. And so this graph shows the amount of ethanol produced in the United States versus the land price per acre in Iowa. And so they track, almost in lockstep, going back to the renewable fuel standard in 2005. So what has this done? It's made it impossible for young people to get into farming. And so there's a lot of young people that would like to farm, but they can't because the price of land is so expensive. And so we have land in Iowa, and I'm sure it's the same here, that goes for $25,000 an acre. Well, how can people get in to farming under that circumstance? And so we've created this guaranteed market for corn, right? The renewable fuel standard has created a guaranteed market for corn. We subsidize its production through the crop insurance program, and then we make the producers invulnerable to any sort of regulation of the pollution. And so, that's a great deal, right? That's a great business deal. We would expect the value of the capital to increase in that circumstance, and it most certainly has. So think about this. The amount of calories that go into fuel ethanol in the United States exceed the caloric requirements of every person in the United States. How perverse is that? What's going into our fuel tanks from corn exceeds the calories of all the food we eat in the entire country. And so it creates perversity in other places too. And now we look at places like western Kansas and Nebraska, eastern Colorado. They're growing corn there now, right? And well, it's too dry there to go grow corn, and so they're sucking water out of the Ogallala Aquifer to irrigate it. It takes 6,000 years to naturally replenish the Ogallala Aquifer. So these are areas where we might have grown wheat 2 generations ago. Well, why are we growing corn there now? To produce ethanol. There's ethanol plants in western Kansas and western Nebraska. How dumb is that? To grow irrigated corn to produce a fuel that, maybe won't even be around a generation from now. The other thing, the Colorado River. We all hear the Colorado River's going dry, right? Los Angeles and Phoenix and Las Vegas are going to run out of water. Well, half of the Colorado River is going to irrigate alfalfa. So the alfalfa is a crop we could grow here without irrigation, right? So why are we growing it in a desert? It's because we've created this guaranteed market for corn here through the renewable fuel standard. Let's just skip through this one. And so in Iowa, 11,000 square miles we use to grow corn for ethanol. What else could we do on that land? So that's about 7 million acres. Well, I could take 1.1 million of those 7 million acres and grow all the dried beans for everybody in the United States. I could take 360,000 of those acres and grow all the potatoes for the whole country. 220,000 acres, all the apples. 150,000 acres, all the sweet corn. 140,000 acres, all the onions. 37,000 acres, all the cherries, and 26,000 acres, all the walnuts for the entire country, and still have 5 million acres left. So why are we doing this? It's perverse. It's perverse what we're doing here, and we're polluting our water because of it. And so let's skip through that. So I thought I'd just show you the cost in Iowa. These are some of our rivers. This is the Soldier River in western Iowa. Just thumb through them. This is the Iowa River near my home, southeast Iowa, Iowa City. Here's the headwaters of the Iowa River in north central Iowa. This is the Des Moines River just southeast of Des Moines. We cannot even bring ourselves to ask farmers not to crop right up to the brink of streams. We can't even do that. There's the Nishnabotna in southwest Iowa. Raccoon River, central Iowa, those are soybeans falling in. That's Little Sioux in western Iowa. We've channelized it. There's a raccoon again. You know, this also unregulated, allowing cattle access to our streams. Here's the top of the Skunk River in north central Iowa. Again, the cattle in the stream. Go ahead. Lake McBride, these are all our lakes here. Go ahead. That's a real picture. Spirit Lake, that's a glacial lake in northwest Iowa. Lake Minnewaska, just keep going. There's North Twin, Lake Keoma, Lake Darling. And so here's Lake Darling. Lake Darling's in southeast Iowa. So Ding Darling was a famous Iowan, big conservationist back in the 1930s, and he did editorial cartoons, and he talked about conservation and soil erosion. There's a state park named after him. There's a lake there. Go back. So that map there, Lake Darling's in the middle, and those colored spots are where manure is being applied right up to the edge of the state park where this lake is. And so not 10 years ago, we paid $16 million in Iowa to restore this lake, dredge it, and create different amenities down there, and go ahead. And this is what it was this summer. So we just paid $16 million to restore this lake, but yet we do nothing about the manure application right up to the boundaries of the state park. And so if this was any other industry, or entity, what would we do? We would punish them. We would. That is just a fact. We would punish them. But we don't. We give the industry a pass. And so people say all the time, well, you hate farmers. No, I don't hate farmers. I mean, farmers are making the same decisions almost all of us would make given the same set of circumstances. The problem isn't that farmers are evil. The problem is they're human beings. Okay? And so because of that, we need a different set of policies that gets us the decisions that we want, that produce the environmental outcomes that we want, and maintain farmer prosperity. And so this here just come out recently. This is from Purdue. Corn and soy growers take a step back from cover crops. And so as we have all our politicians talking about how these nutrient strategies are working, you know, we have farmers planting less cover crops. And so, go ahead. And so this here, when Purdue asked what motivated them to plant cover crops, 65% of them improved soil health, so on and so forth. 0% said carbon sequestration. 0% said that. And this is a climate change program, right? This is a climate change program where this is the climate smart programs that a lot of the NGOs are in on, right? And they were funneling this money to farmers, and 0% of them are doing it to sequester carbon. I mean, we need to have some serious discussions in this country about how we're funneling tax dollars to agriculture to get environmental outcomes. Go ahead. And so we need diverse farming. But until the industry is ready to go there, I say we need laws. And for Iowa, this is what I suggest. We need to ban cropping in the 2-year floodplain. We have over 400,000 acres in the 2-year floodplain that are cropped. How does that make sense? Every other year, all the inputs on those acres gone to the Gulf of Mexico. We need to ban fall tillage. We see fall tillage all over the place right now in Iowa. Iowa State University has been putting out guidance about fall tillage since the 1980s, and it all says one thing: do not do it. But yet we see it still on soybean stubble, which almost every farmer knows that fall tillage on soybean stubble is bad. Why do we allow it? It makes no sense. Ban manure on snow and frozen ground. And so we do have some rules on that in Iowa. But after March 1st, it's, Katie bar the door, right? And so, if you live in Iowa, you know it's pretty common to have snow on the ground on March 1st. Well, you put manure on that, as soon as the snow melts, it's off to the races. So we have the N rate calculator in Iowa. I think Illinois also adheres to it. Farmers can go to the Iowa State website, put in the price of corn, put in the price of nitrogen, and get a recommended nitrogen rate. We know that Iowa farmers are probably 40 to 50 pounds over that, over the recommended rate. So how can we make them adhere to what the recommended rates are? And then we need to reformulate our CAFO regulations. And so in Iowa, our counties have no power to zone against CAFO construction. And so the other thing about our regulations is our manure management plans that are created as part of the construction permit endorse an over-application of nutrients to the crops based on the old yield goal formula that was developed right here at the University of Illinois in the 1980s, and which we now know is discredited and not protective of the environment. And so I like this quote here, Frederick Douglass, from back in the last century. And people, wonder why our water is polluted and like to think that it's mysterious. And I say, no, it's not mysterious. This is a question of power, okay? Our water is polluted because the industry has the power. The citizens don't have the power on this. And so if we want our water to get better, we have to claim the power. We have to get the power. And so how do we do that? And so people think I have the answers. I don't, but I do think we need to agitate for clean water. This is a social justice issue for us. And because we live in the Corn Belt does not mean we should have to endure less quality water than people in other parts of the country. So that's all. Thank you for listening. And and we'll talk about the book in a few minutes after Robert does his thing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Hirschfeld with Prairie Rivers Network. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And of course, I want to thank Chris. Thank you, Chris, not just for making the trek across the expanse of corn and soy from Iowa to Illinois, but thank you for being bold, for being honest, for speaking up for the right of people in the Corn Belt to have clean water. I want to say right up front, I understand that some of what we're discussing tonight may be uncomfortable for some of you. It's not easy to examine the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that have been told to us. Maybe some of you here tonight are upset by what you've heard. I want to go ahead and acknowledge that. And of course, there are many good reasons to be upset about the state of the world in 2023. If you are upset, I hope you'll stick with us tonight and beyond. I feel strongly that this is true. Examining why our farming system produces bad environmental outcomes is not the same as blaming individuals for acting rationally and participating at whatever level in that system. And I know this is true. We welcome good faith conversations about agriculture in the Midwest. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes, and then Chris and I will do a Q&A and take some questions. Earlier today, I was thinking about what I'd say, and particularly how I address any potential discomfort that comes from examining culturalness. And I realized I've always been kind of a troublemaker, and that might come as surprising even to some of my close friends and family, because I've been a quiet troublemaker, because you get away with it that way. But tonight is not about being quiet. It's about getting loud about the condition of our water in the Midwest. And so I'm outside of my comfort zone. If you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe we are meeting each other halfway. Chris works in Iowa. His book is about Iowa. He talked tonight a lot about Iowa. Iowa has some significant differences with Illinois, including the amount of livestock, the political makeup of state government. So it's a legitimate question how much of this is relevant to Illinois. I think you all probably can guess the answer, but Iowa and Illinois are engaged in a shameful competition to see who can be number one in their contribution to the Gulf Dead Zone. We're flushing enormous amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus into our waters. You heard from Maggie earlier some of the statistics, right? 100% of our streams assessed by the Illinois EPA are too polluted to support fish consumption. We know there's nitrate in drinking water wells around the state. We find herbicides and pesticides in the water when and where we choose to look for them. So yes, there are differences. Iowa has more hogs, more chickens. Iowa state government is run by Republicans. In Illinois, we have a Democratic supermajority in the legislature. We have a Democratic governor. We have two powerful U.S. senators, both Democrats. Yet when it comes to the state of our water, those differences don't amount to all that much. And when we talk about the impacts of row crop agriculture, it's not just water pollution. We have utterly transformed the Illinois landscape. There's almost no prairie left. More than 90% of the state's wetlands are gone. Soil blows off fields, creating catastrophic soil storms with terrible consequences. Pesticides and herbicides drift through the air, injuring trees and neighboring properties. I have a 5-year-old who goes to a nature school just south of town. She and the other children, the property is on restored prairie, an Illinois Nature Preserve site. And she and the other children spend 95% of their time playing outside, digging in the dirt, looking at plants and animals, examining nature, having fun like kids should do. It's an incredible place, providing an incredible experience for the kids that are there. Multiple times last spring, they had to run the children inside because clouds of herbicides drifted onto the school property from a neighbor who was spraying their fields. You might say, Robert, what can you expect at a school outside of town? Well, first off, I expect property rights to be respected. I expect kids not to have to breathe pesticides at school. But even if I accepted that as an unfortunate reality of being out next to farm fields. I do want to fill in the rest of the story. Prairie Rivers Network sampled trees all over Champaign-Urbana this summer, including in the center of town. Every single tree at every single site we sampled, and we focused on sites on and near schools and playgrounds. Every single tree that we sent to the lab had residues of multiple herbicides. Every single one. So it's not just about water. It's about the air we breathe. It's about how warm we let the planet get. It's about our kids' health. But water is where we're starting here tonight. Last week, I met with the director of the Illinois Department of Agriculture. Seemed like a nice guy. It was a very pleasant meeting. In the meeting, we talked about the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy, which is a mouthful. Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction. I'm not totally sure if that's 3 negatives or 2. It depends on whether you think nutrients are good or bad. I think most people would think nutrients are good. I probably certainly would before I really started this work. A cynic might say that the nutrient loss reduction strategy is purposefully opaque government gibberish. Perhaps chemical ag runoff is not a problem that's intended to be understood or even solved. Anyway, the meeting went like this. Director Costello says, look, the reality is we're not going to meet our goals. The goal is 45% reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus by 2025. And it's not just that we're not getting to our goals. The problem is getting worse. We're going backwards. So he says, we're not going to meet our goals. We're not getting where we need to go. We need to be realistic. What's the low-hanging fruit? What's something small we can do to chip away at the fringes of this colossal problem? Because right now, the bare minimum is all we can and should expect. Now, I could lament the tone of this conversation. I could blame him. But the reality is, I don't. I do not blame Director Costello. I don't blame him for offering us crumbs. The reality is we can't expect to walk into that room and make demands because we haven't done the work to build the power. We, the community here, of people who care about water, who care about the air we breathe, who care about what we eat and what we drink, we haven't organized such that our government feels the pressure to deliver clean water. When a bill goes to the state legislature in Illinois, do you know what the first question that legislators ask is? They ask, where's the Farm Bureau on this? What they don't ask is, does this get us cleaner water? What they don't ask is, how does this impact people downstream or downwind? What they don't ask is, what does this mean for the future generation? So that is what has to change. Chris ended by talking about building power. That's what we're kicking off here tonight with Clean Water Forever. This is about building the power, so those questions are what our elected officials ask when we go in front of them. Does this get us cleaner water? What does Clean Water Forever think about this bill? Unless we do that, we are never going to get more than low-hanging fruit. So we're starting here tonight. We want you to join with us. Prairie Rivers Network is committed from going to Cairo to Chicago to build power, to demand and deliver cleaner water, now and forever. We will need your help. We will need you to meet with lawmakers if you're willing, to send them emails, to give them a call, to post on social media, maybe to volunteer. All of that is helpful. And I won't be coy about it. This takes funding. This takes money. We are committed to the work, and I know many of you in here have been committed to us, and we appreciate that. I'm asking you now to give, to support this work. We have a lot planned for this next year. Community organizing across the state, water testing, tree sampling, multiple bills in the state legislature, including a bill that would protect wetlands now that they've lost protection because the U.S. Supreme Court pulled back wetland protections in the Clean Water Act. A bill that would ensure the public's right, that the public keeps its right to use and enjoy public waters. Increased water monitoring around the state, groundwater, wells, surface waters. I can essentially guarantee you that these policies will face serious opposition from certain ag interests. So when these bills get introduced, I want the legislators to feel the pressure to ask, what does Clean Water Forever think about this bill? If we're going to build that power, we do need your support. So again, I'm asking you to make a donation tonight. There are QR codes on the chairs in front of you. There are also PRN staff in the back who can take donations. If you donate $100 tonight, you will get a signed copy of Chris's book. If you donate 45, 50, I don't remember what the exact number was, but I think it was 50. If you donate $50, we also have some amazing posters designed and printed by a local artist for our Save Our Trees campaign, which is about that drifting herbicide issue. So if we want to get change, we have to get this movement to scale. A donation tonight gets us started. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your support. We're going to do a Q&A.
You know, we have farmers in all the states that are doing things, you know, the quote-unquote right way. I think we see farmers in Iowa and Illinois and throughout the Corn Belt that, you know, don't succumb to the temptation of all cash crop all the time. Do we have entire geographical regions in the Corn Belt that you could identify? I would say no. I'm up in Wisconsin a lot, southwest Wisconsin, and a lot of that's pretty hilly ground. And so you see a lot of cover crops up there. You see a fair amount of no-till, but you know, you also see a lot of tillage up there. And so I think where you see the most widespread adoption of practices is where soil erosion is where they're most vulnerable to soil erosion. And so, you know, when you see hilly ground, you're much more likely to see farmers doing things that are more environmentally sound.
Okay, got a couple questions here from online and from the crowd. Let me ask a couple challenging ones, right? Start with that. So, no farmer will accept a policy that results in a reduction of yield. How should farmers farm? You can answer that, or you can challenge, I guess.
So that in a nutshell is a problem, and so we're not willing to sacrifice even one bushel for an outcome that's, you know, beneficial to the common good, right? And so as long as we have that mindset, you know, yeah, we're not going to solve it. Just, there's no two ways around it. And so the state nutrient strategies are all about that, right? They suggest that this can all be done without a loss in yield. And I think when people say that, they don't have a real good knowledge of natural systems and ecology and physics. And so, you know, in nature, you don't get something for nothing. That's just the way it is. And so, you know, let's ask ourselves, do we need all these commodities? Do we need them all? Right? Like I said, especially the ethanol component. We know that ethanol really doesn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so why are we doing this? And so maybe we should try to design a system around human nutrition and environmental outcomes, and not one that's designed around commerce. And so that's what we have right now. We have a system that's designed around commerce.
Chris, you were most recently at University of Iowa, and I do want to ask about state universities, but you were also with the Iowa Soybean Association for a while, and with Des Moines Water Works.
That's right.
Yeah. So you've kind of seen the issue from a couple different sides. Could you just talk a little bit about what you learned in your time at both of those stops?
Well, when I worked at the waterworks, that's when my eyes were really open to the issues. And so when the Raccoon River went right by the treatment plant, and I'd see this river, and about a third of the days of the year, you just look at this and go, wow, people are going to drink this, right? And of course, we're going to treat it first, but still, I felt it was really a travesty for, this river to look this way when it was serving a metropolitan area of 500,000 people. And I would ask myself all the time, would we tolerate this if it was Chicago or Minneapolis or even St. Louis? And, the answer that came into my head was always no, but we do tolerate it in Iowa. And so that's when my eyes were open. When I worked at the waterworks, I knew a lot of the people at the Soybean Association. We had a water monitoring project, and I knew the guy over there that was the head of environmental programs. His name was Roger Wolf. And I was getting kind of bored at the waterworks, and so I decided to try something new, and I went over there. And I think this idea that, we can't sacrifice one bushel, I saw people that really did want better water in the abstract, right? This whole thing, one of the essays in my book is we all want clean water. Well, do we? I mean, we all want it in the abstract. And so that's kind of how I saw things at Soybean. And I felt that, I'm really glad I worked there, really glad, because it enabled me to learn about farming and learn about the pressures that farmers are under. And, this whole thing, well, we want clean water. We all want clean water. Well, I want to be thin too, but I'm not. And so, how bad do we want it? What are we willing to sacrifice? And, when I worked at Soybean, it just didn't seem like we were willing to sacrifice very much.
All right, here's one from the audience. You mentioned diversification and landscape change, different crops, as vital to addressing the clean water crisis. But we need people back on the landscape to do that. How do innovative land access, farm succession models, and multi-party ownership systems fit into policy that can support the regulations and policy you talked about?
So that's, a very astute question and comment there that, the water quality problems are part and parcel of the decline of rural America in the Midwest. And so, in Iowa, we have 99 counties, 70 of them have a declining population. I think it's the same thing here. And, consolidation, especially in the livestock industry, has really driven a depopulation of rural Iowa. And so, yes, we need more people on the land. Yes, we absolutely do. And, I'm not a huge fan of Wendell Berry's writing, or, not a huge fan, period. But that's one of the things that he says a lot, that we need more people on the land. And I agree with that 100%. So how do we get it? And this thing with the demographics of farming and the land prices is a very difficult problem that's not going to solve itself. This is like a really dirty term here that sounds sort of Soviet, but we need land reform. We need land reform in the Corn Belt. And so, you can't have land going for $25,000 an acre and 85-year-old guys farming it, working 6 weeks out of the year. I mean, that's not a formula for environmental improvement. It's just not. And so we need policy to address this issue with land prices, and especially absentee landlords that own farmland.
So there are a lot of good questions coming in, and I apologize if we don't get to all of them, but we'll hang out for a few minutes and at least get to a few of them. I mentioned mythology, and one of the myths is that, well, we're feeding the world. Do you think it is our responsibility to feed the world?
Well, we don't feed the world. I mean, how can you make that argument when, more calories are going into fuel ethanol than what goes into our bodies in this country? And so the other thing that we do, our sort of gluttony for fertilizer causes the prices of fertilizer worldwide to go up. And so people that are trying to feed other people, like farmers in Africa, you know, they have to pay more for fertilizer because we're doing superficial stuff with the best farmland on earth, right? And that's to grow ethanol and to grow corn for ethanol. And so, you know, we're not feeding the world. I mean, you could maybe make the case that the guy in the Central Valley of California is feeding some people, but, you know, we produce corn for ethanol, and then we produce a protein for the world's wealthy people. That's what we do.
So one of the questions was, why does Iowa have more CAFOs than Illinois? So in addition to posing that, I also wanted to mention, you know, I think one of your most well-read, well-traveled essays was about the amount of waste, the human equivalent amount of waste that hogs produce in Iowa, and I think that would be enlightening for people.
So we always knew in my circle that, you know, the amount of waste that the livestock was producing dwarfed what the human beings were producing. And so when I wrote that one, there was nothing new in there for us. And then that map, I still shake my head to this day that map was maybe the most consequential thing that I did in my career. And part of it's on the cover of the book, I think, that put a world, city, or place in each of our watersheds in Iowa. And so, yeah, we have the fecal equivalent of about 168 million people in Iowa when you count all our livestock. And so, you know, a lot of farmers would say, well, that's a good thing, right? Because that's all there to fertilize our crops, and we don't have to buy commercial fertilizer. Yes, except we know that in Iowa, our worst watersheds are the ones that have the most intense livestock production. And so we also know the availability of manure in Iowa really doesn't affect sales of commercial fertilizer all that much. And so farmers in watersheds that have a lot of livestock are basically buying the same amount of fertilizer as they are in watersheds where we don't have livestock. And so why is that? And, you know, I can speculate on it. I think, you know, the manure is free. And like I say, if beer was free, I'd drink more of it. Well, you know, the manure is free. And so I think the temptation to use more is high. And as a consequence, our streams in these manure-dense watersheds are our worst.
So we're here in Champaign-Urbana at the home of the University of Illinois, a land grant school. You were at University of Iowa. There's a lot of research that's done here, deep connections with agriculture. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the land grant university's role in this system.
Yeah, so, you know, this is an important question, and there's a lot of fine lines in academia, right? And which side to get on sometimes isn't very clear, or sometimes it's really abundantly clear. And, you know, it's no secret that the land grants in the Corn Belt have been, let's just say, complicit with some things about these production systems. And so, you know, when I go over to Ames, if you go to the Curtis Hall, where the College of Agriculture is, you go in there. I mean, there's not so much as a lampshade or a toilet seat that's not sponsored by some agribusiness giant. Okay, you laugh, but I'm not kidding you. I mean, and so, you know, if you're a researcher and you need money to support your research program and to get graduate students and graduate PhD students and to go to the important meetings and rub shoulders with the important people and all these things, you know, the temptation is extremely high, right? And the temptation is extremely high to go along with the program. And I think, you know, that definitely has happened. You know, I can't speak authoritatively about the University of Illinois, but, you know, I know this is pretty widespread. So if you're a researcher, what do you do? What do you do about it? Do you speak out and get ostracized, which does happen? Or do you go along with it and essentially become part of the problem? And I think these are important questions. And, you know, I got to a point, I had been at the university for a while, and I just decided, you know, I can't go along with this anymore. That I was a public servant, and that I had to, I felt like I had a responsibility to criticize the decisions that were resulting in degraded water. I felt it was my responsibility to do that. You know, it's, people want to say, oh, it's courageous or whatever. Well, I didn't really see it that way. I just felt like, you know, if I wanted to sleep at night, this is what I had to do.
Thank you.
How did that go over in Iowa?
Well, you know, the negative pushback that I got is probably less than what you might think, although, you know, when push came to shove at the end, you know, the message was clear. You know, when I was writing my blog, and I don't know if you know this or not, I had a blog, and it was on the university domain. It became more provocative over the years. And, you know, that was a little bit by design. But I was writing, people at Iowa State had blogs too that were writing about the same subjects. You know, manure application, fertilizer application, so on and so forth. And, but these were really sort of dry, white paper type pieces that weren't intended for general audiences, but they were on the university domain over there. And so I was writing about the same subjects, but, you know, as I said, I openly criticized decisions that led to bad water. If I see fall tillage, I'm going to criticize it, right? I think, you know, if we see something that is not necessary in the current production system and that results in pollution, as researchers, we should criticize it. I saw that as my role, and so I did. And I also wrote my pieces, you know, with pizzazz, I would say. I tried to write them with pizzazz. I wanted people to read them. I wanted general audiences to read them. I think people in academia have absolved themselves of any responsibility with communicating with the public, and this is a big problem all over the place in our country, not just with what we're talking about tonight. And I think you know, I think to really understand the science, you have to be able to explain it to lay people. And for me, that was a tool to help me understand it. And then also I felt like I was fulfilling my responsibility as a public servant.
So one question that came in says that they disagree, and they say that it says that economics and technology has improved the nutrient pollution problem, which that doesn't square with the data that I've seen. But within the question is an embedded, you know, agreement that there are serious problems from agriculture. And one thing that the question asks about is maybe focusing on other issues, other pollutants besides nutrients. And I think they're getting to the idea that some of these cause serious health concerns, cancers. You know, can you speak at all to the broader health concerns of some of these water contamination?
So I never say that nothing is improved. I never say that. And so one of the biggest improvements we had was we did have improvements in soil erosion, as I said during the slideshow. In 1985, the Farm Bill included conservation compliance. Well, what's conservation compliance? It required farmers that were farming highly erodible land to adopt a soil conservation plan if they wanted to be eligible for the federal farm programs. It worked. It worked. We have the data to show that it worked, that soil erosion declined in Iowa and the clarity of our streams improved in the few years after conservation compliance. So we know that worked. So, you know, why reinvent the wheel? Why don't we have conservation compliance for nutrients? right? If it worked for soil erosion, why wouldn't it work for nutrients? I think it would. You know, some of the technology has delivered some environmental outcomes. And so I'm not anti-GMO. I think, you know, the GMO crops, I have no fear when it comes to human consumption of GMO crops. And I think Roundup did cause some of the more toxic pesticides to decline in use. I think there's no doubt about that. Now, was that an overall good? Was GMO an overall good? Well, it certainly expanded the acres. It certainly helped expand the acres, and it certainly made farming easier, okay? And that certainly helped consolidation to occur and drive more farmers out of business. That no doubt did happen. So the technology, you know, I say all the time, I really don't like the term industrial agriculture. It doesn't really say too much to me. I don't like the term factory farm. That doesn't say too much to me either. I think, you know, farmers would be dumb not to adopt technology, you know, that's going to help their operation. But the idea that a nutrient pollution has gotten better, that is not true. We have the data that shows that it has not. Now, the last 2 or 3 years have been very dry, and so we've seen a reduction in nutrient loss, at least in Iowa. I think Illinois was pretty normal this year for precipitation, but Iowa's been very dry, and so we have seen a drop in especially nitrogen loss the last couple of years.
I think just a couple more. So how about organics? Someone asked about that. With organics, people take yield cuts for a better price. Inputs change from chemicals to mechanical inputs. Your thoughts on organic?
So I never say that the answer is organic farming. I never say that, and I don't talk about it. And you know, organic farmers can get pretty aggressive on the tillage sometimes, right? We know that, and so. Is it the silver bullet? I would say no, it isn't. I think overall, using less poisons on our environment is a good idea overall, right? And so we know that, you know, a lot of our soil gets sterilized by our farming practices, right? We know that. If we did less of that, would that be a good thing? Yeah, probably would, right? Probably would be a good thing if we did less of that. And so how can we do that? Well, you know, can you grow corn in most cases, you know, without some sort of pest control? You know, it's tough, right? It's tough. And so how do we do that? Well, we diversify our farms. And so we work with nature to help us with these pests. And so that's the 5-year rotation, right? And so when we have more diverse crop rotations, then we reduce opportunities for pests, both insects and weeds. Now, you know, everybody says, well, I can't just grow that. I need somebody to buy it. Yeah, I get that, right? If you're going to grow alfalfa, you got to have something that can eat it, or you got to have a neighbor that's got something that can eat it. And so if we want these more diverse farming systems, we need policy that will steer us in that direction. And so I always say ethanol. Why does the ethanol industry exist? It exists for one reason, and that's government policy. Government policy created this behemoth, right, of the ethanol industry. And if we're able to do that, we ought to be able to create systems that produce better environmental outcomes.
Do you get a Christmas card from the Iowa Farm Bureau?
Well, believe it or not, I was a Farm Bureau member at one time, and then they FOIA'd my emails, and so then I decided I didn't want to be a Farm Bureau member anymore.
So what role does the Farm Bureau play?
Well, I think people, when I hear you say the Illinois legislature says, well, what does Farm Bureau think? I really think some of these legislators are not sharpest tack in the box. You know, I can't talk about Illinois Farm Bureau that much because I don't know, but in Iowa, it's an insurance company, right? It's an insurance company. And so why is an insurance company driving so much of policy in Iowa? I don't understand that. And so the vast majority of Farm Bureau members are not farmers. They're just insurance customers. And so why our legislators don't have more spine than they do when it comes to Farm Bureau, I really don't know. I don't understand it. There's so much about politics. People think I know politics. There's so much I don't get. I don't know.
There's a question about indigenous knowledge. You know, what's the role for the environmental knowledge of indigenous peoples, which also makes me think that it's worth recognizing that, you know, all of this land was once indigenous and colonized. Settlers came in and created this system. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, I'm not an authority on indigenous knowledge. Clearly, they knew some things that I know some things that we don't or we don't practice, but I can't really speak authoritatively about it, and so I won't. But I have some slides about Iowa and how we got the land, and in fact, one thing a lot of people don't realize is we farmed so much of Iowa. We claimed it for farming as a way to get rid of indigenous people. And so those two things went hand in hand, and so did we really need to farm all of Iowa 150 years ago? Of course we did not, but we did it anyway as a way to get indigenous people out of there. And so there's a lot of legacy here that's not so comfortable to talk about, right? And so this seems incredible, but this is true. 99.7% of Iowa farmers are white, 99.7%. And so that did not happen by accident, right? That was an intentional thing when the territorial government was formed. And so there's a lot of legacy here that's not really, you know, comfortable to talk about. But I guess that's about all I have to say about it.
And then I think the last question I'll ask, and I'm just going to summarize quite a few that were in a similar vein. What can I as an individual do? Some people are asking about, you know, should we think about consumption? You know, what is it that I consume, how I eat, eating less meat? But if you have thoughts on, you know, someone who wants change, wants to participate in that, what can an individual do?
So I have, you know, some farmers, there's one in particular I can think of, and he's in Canada, and he jerks my chain on this all the time that, well, if the consumers would revolt, we would get the systems that we want. And, you know, I'm not buying it that that's even a practical idea. You know, by us making decisions about what we eat or what we put in our car, will that change the structure of Corn Belt farming? And I'm sorry, I just have my doubts. I think we need, so here I'll say this. I say all the time, these pollution problems we have, they're colossal, right? Somebody stole my word there a little bit ago. And so we're polluting at a continental scale, right? And so there's no examples of something like this being solved through individual actions. So to think that farmers are going to do this through individual actions is a fantasy, and I think you can say the same thing on the consumer side. To think that we can solve this through individual actions by the consumer is probably a fantasy. So what can you do? And so what I tell people is, look, in Iowa, the legislature is a non-starter. They don't want to hear about any of this. You know, there's people in our legislature that say there's nothing wrong with our water. I mean, that's true. And so what do? And, you know, I think the county supervisors, you know, who has oversight of land in rural Iowa? Well, it's the county supervisors. And so we have all these organized drainage districts in Iowa that oversee the infrastructure of the tile networks. These are formed under Iowa Code back in 1903, I think, and the county supervisors oftentimes oversee the tile drainage networks. And so, we need to be at these county supervisor meetings and agitating for clean water. And, say what you want about Farm Bureau, they're pretty successful, right, at what they want, at getting what they want. And what is the system that they have? Well, at least in Iowa, they have the county chapters, and the county chapters go to these sorts of meetings. They go to everything. County supervisor meetings, city council meetings, school board meetings, and they agitate for the issues that are important for Farm Bureau. That's what we need on the environmental side. We need organization, and we need people that will agitate at the levels of government below the legislature for the things that we want until the legislature is made up of people that want change. And again, to touch on the politics of this, to think you can just go into a voting booth and check the right box or the left box, whatever the case may be, and get clean water, I think, is a fantasy. And as I said on the radio today, I mean, we have polluted water that's blue and we have polluted water that's red. And that's just the facts. And, Democrats are not anxious to take this on, and why they won't run on this is a mystery to me. I don't know, but.
Earlier this year, Farm Bureau was going around to county boards and getting counties to pass resolutions saying that we support farming. And sure, they're all going to sign on to something that says we support farming, but why were they doing that, and what did that actually mean? That was something that germinated this seed that we've got to respond, we've got to organize, we've got to do what Chris is talking about. So again, I'm going to reiterate my call from earlier that I hope, I know many of you are supporters and are part of our network. I hope any of you who are new will join with us tonight. I want to encourage you to buy Chris's book, to subscribe to his Substack. If you're here, I think you had to register. We will send out emails with links to all of those, with links to his Substack. I really want to thank Chris for coming in. And he was on the radio. He was on the local NPR on the 21st, the show. I strongly encourage you to go check that out. You can listen back to the show. It was very well done, of course. That's how Maggie was able to steal that line. I also really like the line, and I'm going to steal this, that we're polluting an ocean, 1,000 miles away? I mean, that kind of crystallized the idea, yes, we're here, right here, we are polluting an ocean, hundreds of miles away. So, go listen to that, subscribe to the Substack, donate tonight, buy Chris's book, please get involved with us. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you to Chris. Yeah, we got our last one. Yeah, make it quick.
I'm on the part of the Region of Loss Reduction Strategy here in Illinois. I'm one of the 3 farmers. Of a working policy group that has approximately 30 individuals. We are improving water quality here in Illinois. We really are. But it's not because of agriculture. It's because of what the city of Chicago and those suburbs are done with their sanitary sewers. That's the first thing. Illinois is going the wrong way as far as agriculture. We're getting worse every year. The comments that are made is, it's not our fault, it's because we're getting more rain. Well, we know we can't change how much rain we get, but we sure can change our nutrient management plans, our cover crops, and our no-till strip tilling. That's one thing. The second thing is the Iowa method for calculating how much nitrogen to use is a bogus formula. It has nothing to do with agronomics. It's all about economics. And we talk about return on investment, etc. That's what's driving, and when we use that formula, we're actually working against what we need to be.
So you're talking about the yield goal.
Well, when you say, what's the nitrogen, price of nitrogen, and that's what determines the price of.
So that's the N rate calculator. And the N rate calculator, now look, I disagree with you. The N rate calculator, there's data behind the N rate calculator. The yield goal formula that we use for manure, that has been discredited.
Yes, I would agree. But I've used the N rate calculator on my own farm and find that we work with efficiencies as opposed as far as the efficiency of the economic growth of the farm versus the price that somebody sets in Chicago or some fertilizer company sets for nitrogen. Those are not economic formulas. All of you, I am a lobbyist also. And what was stated there about Farm Bureau being able to have the ear of most of our legislators is totally true. So if you're a member of Farm Bureau, you need to reach out to your legislators and let them know that you're not necessarily in support of what they're saying. That you're a Farm Bureau. I'm a Farm Bureau member. I've been on the Farm Bureau board in our local county. I'm not on there anymore. But I like my insurance policy. So those are the things I think all of us have a lot to do regarding educating ourselves before we begin to agitate, because we want to have all our ducks in order when we go there. Jerry Costello, I agree, is a nice man. He's a politician. He's not really an agriculturalist. Thank you very much. I see a few many friends in the audience and everything. Oh my God.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. I would have been upset if we didn't have a few last-minute dramatics. And I do want to say, yes, so cities are doing their part. Wastewater treatment plants are doing their part. They are not only meeting their goals, they are exceeding them. So if we're getting worse, where does the problem lie, right? You can only squeeze so much blood out of a stone of reducing nutrient pollution from point sources. Why are they meeting their goals? Well, we have laws, we have policies, it's regulated. Why are we not meeting our goals on the other side? We don't. And I think we can leave it there. Thank you.